stopping the insidious LGBTQ agenda and trying to define community standards of decency. That is the goal of Senator Rob Standridge in this legislative session. He joins us today to talk about those bills and, for the first time ever, talk about his attempt to replace Greg Treat as Senate President Pro Tem. Rob Standridge joins us today. I'm Andrew Spino on special assignment with Project 46. Well, Senator Rob Standridge, thank you so much for coming in.
Absolutely.
You're in your last term, right? You've been
Last
in
term.
10 years?
10 years, yes.
What kind of changes have you seen? Before we get into the next session, which of course is the focus, but tell us about what you've witnessed over the last 10 years. Do you look at Oklahoma government differently?
I do. It's changed a lot. I mean, when I came in, we were really super focused on decreasing the size of government, lowering taxes, making sure we protect people's personal freedoms. Sad to say, it's changed a lot from that. Today, it's not near the focus on that, and it's more about growing government programs. And that's the reason I vote no a lot more today than I voted no my first, let's say, 6 years.
Well, tell us what your priorities are coming into the 23 session.
23 session, I've got bills related to transition surgeries and treatments. As a pharmacist, I have a real problem with the drugs that are being given to children in regards to transitioning. I have bills.
Well, I'll tell you what, let's before we get into the policy, let's stop there because this is your field of expertise. You're a pharmacist,
yes,
by trade. What are these transitioning drugs? What are the? I mean, we know the short-term effects,
right.
Deeper voice, whatever, or the opposite. What are the side effects that people don't hear about?
So puberty blockers is what they're called, but in essence, they're hormones. What we've learned in the medical field with regards to hormones is we try to duplicate the body's natural hormone production. So with women that go through menopause or have hormone imbalances, or men, mainly women though, so when we treat them over the years, over the last, let's say 50 to 100 years, we're trying to minimize the symptoms they have from having hormone imbalances, such as menopause. We try to balance that back to what nature intended it. That's why you hear some pharmacists and physicians talk about natural hormone replacement or, things like that. So you're getting into what's naturally in the body.
Okay.
So that's been the focus for 50 to 100 years. But all of a sudden now,
the focus of the pharmaceutical
industry, of physicians, of pharmacists, everybody wants to try to. We started with horse urine years ago. We still use a little bit of that, female horse urine, which is called primer, and we still use some of that, but that's very strong. So we try to minimize. One is it encourages breast cancer. Some of those breast cancers feed on estrogen, so you want to limit the amount of estrogen so you don't feed the breast cancers that are dependent upon it. And other problems. There's other cancers that can evolve out of hormone imbalances, so we want to be very careful with that. So now let's go backwards a bit to almost a medieval thinking, where now with these hormones we're actually doing intentional damage to the hormone balance of a human being. So regardless of what your idea of transitioning and gender, you shouldn't be mucking with nature's balance of hormones in the body. Because when you do, you cause problems. And cancer is probably the least of them, but it's a big one.
I mean, cancer sounds like a long-term issue.
Of course.
What are some of the, it can't,
if you
logically speaking, it can't be good to create that kind of chaos in your body. Because I think your body's constantly fighting it, right? Too much estrogen or testosterone, get it out. Right?
So chaos is a good term because, again, the medical world has always tried to protect the balance. So let's say she's low on estrogen, she's having hot flashes, she's having all sorts of other symptoms. Well, we want to get rid of the symptoms, but not so much estrogen that it throws the body in imbalance, and that we perpetuate cancers, or we invite them, or we invite other problems, thyroid problems. There's a myriad of problems that are caused from hormone imbalances. So now with these children and young adults, I think it's ridiculous. I think it's malpractice with regards to what their age is, but I'm focused primarily on children, to intentionally throw their hormone balance out of balance. Give them hormones that their body isn't producing, like estrogen for a guy or too much testosterone for a girl. It's malpractice on the surface, just from the idea of the concept that we're supposed to be keeping the body in balance, not out of balance. Right. And what we're trying to achieve, especially with children, is this whimsical belief today, such as they want to be a fireman or an astronaut or whatever they want to be that day. So let's pretend they want to be an astronaut. What drugs are we going to give them to let them succeed in being an astronaut? We can't do that. We can't invade the body, put things in the body that weren't intended to be there on hopes that maybe they become a man or a woman, but without regards to what the long-term effects are, which are probably extremely detrimental. We don't know yet how bad they are. I'm sure they're much worse than what would be expected. I mean, it's I have the same philosophy about the ADD drugs, but not near as bad as my issue here.
Okay, so talk about this legislation you're proposing and what it would do.
So the legislation, I somewhat analogize it with there's something called wrongful life, which is a legal premise, a common law legal premise that says that physicians and even parents can be held accountable later in life for not counseling or doing right by a child that's born with a disability. So this is a known doctrine. That's kind of what my bills follow in line with. In other words,
okay.
That child, when they become an adult and they want to reproduce, or they want to have a family, a normal child or childbearing process, whether that's breastfeeding or nurturing or the other things that go along with being a parent, because it's not just about reproductivity. There's more to it than that. That child is disabled when it comes to that. Why are they disabled? Because the parent and the doctor ignored that future possibility. That is a tort, if you will, or that is a place of liability. It is with regards to disability. This is nothing more than a voluntarily caused disability for the child.
And so would your bill also restrict public funding of these surgeries?
Mine doesn't touch on that. Mine is basically on its base concept is a cause of action for that child that is inflicted as an adult with the inability to bear or produce a child as they normally would be. So based solely on the actions of adults when they were a minor. I believe it's malpractice as an adult too. I don't know if my bills touch on that as strongly as they do when they were a child.
Well, let me ask you this. You're connected in the whole medical world. If I had an 11-year-old and I went to the doctor and I said he perceives himself to be a double amputee,
right.
Will you please cut off both his legs? How difficult would it be to find a doctor who's willing to do that?
Yeah, the analogy is perfect. I mean, so some people, well, it's not that. I mean, I was at a meeting with some health science center physicians last year, and I left the meeting a bit psychologically scarred, because these are health professionals, and their callousness that they approach the thought of mastectomies on children, female children, was bizarre. It was just happenstance. So that's just what we did. We had parental permission. You can't give the child a tattoo with parental permission. You can't give the child a beer with parental permission. They can't vote with parental permission. But you can lop off their breasts with parental permission. It doesn't make any sense.
The U.S. Attorney General declared that 13 is too young to be on social media. But 13 is old enough, apparently, to decide which parts of your body to chop off.
And that meeting was one of the worst I've had, because they seem like three very respectable, knowledgeable medical professionals. And to callously look at me and say, well, we had parental permission before we surgically remove the breast permanently for that child for the rest of their life when they're 13 and they all of a sudden wake up and think they're a boy. I mean, how many times has your child woke up and confused about their life and who they are and where they're going to be and who they're going to be? How, every morning until they're 20? We talked about earlier, when does boys mature? Every morning until they're 25 or 22? You said 22. I think you're giving them a lot of credit. You're giving them, those boys, a lot of credit. But whether it's 22 or whether it's 18.
I'm 52 and I haven't fully matured
correct.
yet.
So if you wake up one morning, especially if a child wakes up one morning, they're 13, they're confused, they're having troubles at school, they're traumatized at school, they're being picked on, whatever it is that's bothering them that day. As adults, our job is not to give in to that whim and say, okay, today you want to be an astronaut, we're going to strap you in a suit and send you to space. That's not what we do. We work through that issue, maybe get them counseling if so be it, but we don't surgically alter their bodies. We don't chop off limbs, as the amputee example. We don't chop off breasts. We don't remove all their internal reproductive organs or take veins out of their arms or whatever medieval processes these people are going through to change this person based on how they woke up this morning.
Okay. Now,
I'm sorry, I get a little bit of passion, but it's very disturbing to me.
Don't apologize. There's bound to be pushback from the left.
Like I talked about our 10 years, I doubt if I get those bills heard, because for some reason today there seems to be a disconnect between parental rights and personal freedoms than when I first got in. We'll see. I mean, I filed them, and I hate to speak ahead what's going to happen, but I couldn't get a lot of my stuff heard last year.
Well, I mean, how will you respond to the inevitable allegations that come that you're putting kids' lives at risk? If you don't allow this, they'll kill themselves. Right. What's your response to those arguments?
So I would tell you this: even if you told me that the suicide rate was greater if I didn't mutilate them, I would still say you should not permanently scar a child with drugs or surgery, irregardless of what you think you're achieving with regards to suicide. But the reality is, it's just the opposite. The girls that transition, I mean, the stats I read are closing in on 100% suicide rate. It's incredible the amount of suicide, the number of suicide, and males are almost as bad.
Right, and I think generally among people with gender dysphoria, there is a much higher suicidality rate, 40% or something like that.
Yes, even before that, but after the procedures, and then if you talk to those that are trying to come back, and I don't know if you're aware, but there's several within the Senate family that they are the trauma in their eyes and in their hearts and in their minds is palpable. You talk to them and you walk away sad and crying because it's what they've been through. A lot of times because their parents put them through it, but some of them on their own, some of them as adults. But what they've gone through, I mean, I don't know if men that have gone through war are as traumatized as some of these people, that have seen their friends shot next to them are as traumatized as some of these people. Their lives are destroyed.
Yeah, probably a unique trauma.
It is a unique trauma, and some of it's self-inflicted for sure. Mm-hmm. So,
but trauma nonetheless.
Yeah, and I'm a bit libertarian, so if you inflict it upon yourself, I mean, that's a little different for me. So my passion is really
But
with
then
the
again,
children.
if you're a child with a bunch of adults shoving you into this.
That's correct.
So your bill would give these kids the ability, once they're adults, to sue their own parents, sue their...
Mainly, it does allow for that, but it also
physician.
allows the physicians. And frankly, anybody that would lop off a breast of a young girl, I guess the only thing that's going to stop them from doing that is monetary punishment. Because I can't imagine picking up a knife and extracting the female organs from a young child. I just don't
perfectly healthy organ.
A perfectly healthy organ from a young, beautiful young girl. I just don't understand that. I'll never understand that. What amount of money could possibly entice somebody to do that? And at OU,
or if someone this doctor might genuinely believe they're doing.
I don't don't believe that for a second.
Right, okay.
At OU, they got a whopping, I think, $500,000 or $1 million to set up this. I mean, it's not even their money.
This is happening at OU. I think a lot of people don't realize.
Yeah, it's not even their money. So they're doing total double mastectomies on children for money for a center
in Oklahoma.
And so let's don't kid ourselves. And it was not easy to make that stop. In fact, there should have been a much bigger piece of legislation that stopped that throughout the whole state, not just at OU. But anyway, those are some bills that I have.
Okay, well, I mean, along those lines, you were talking about another bill that would, I guess, would be define public obscenity. Tell us what.
Well, so I've been working on this for a couple of years. One about the library books that you and I have talked about before. So I do have a bill on that really just reduces it down to informed parental consent. So
you were here last year.
Yes, we talked about this and showed some of the books.
Yeah, and it was.
I would encourage anybody to go back and rewatch that.
Absolutely.
At least the book segment where you had pictures of the books.
And if
really
it's
good.
behind the paywall, you got to subscribe.
Yes.
But I mean, by any objective measure, those were very explicit sexual images in that book, even though they were like in cartoon form. But nevertheless, it was unmistakable what was going on.
Correct.
What became of that bill?
The bill passed out of committee, but what was odd is the committee process is, I mean, it was like pulling eye teeth to get it heard. I mean, it really was, which is a no-brainer. Who wants pornography in schools? Because the bill that I had last year...
Did this land in the Education Committee?
Yes.
Okay,
and the bill I had was, I mean, it was, and I was willing to make it even tighter, but I mean, it was just for pretty much porn. I mean, the books to fit the standard that I set had to be pretty explicit in porn.
Yeah. It was narrowly defined.
It was narrow, and I was willing to even more narrowly define it. But the chairman worked against me. The whole thing worked against me. It was really bizarre. And during the committee hearing, at the end of the committee hearing, I used the word, I'm not going to use it because you may not be able to show it, but it's self-pleasuring. I was told by one of my newspaper friends, pleasure thyself, self-gratifying, use a different word than that word so people can... But this word was used by a...
Surrender being king of your castle.
There you go. This word was used by a librarian in a metro school district to me. I didn't ask for the information, saying it's okay to give a book about this self-pleasuring topic to 7th and 8th grade kids.
It's like a how-to
And
guide.
she was bashing my bill by saying, hey, I believe we should be giving this to 7th and 8th grade kids without parental consent or parental knowledge. It's crazy.
Yeah.
I got all sorts of emails like
It's the only
this.
time I'd be afraid to ask my kid what they learned in school that day.
Yes, that's right. And so I actually met with her bosses, and they disagree, but yet they're still doing it. Maybe not that district, but it's going on all over Oklahoma. But anyway, so I believe that the obscenity side is I don't believe that an adult legally can give obscene material to a child.
Okay, which brings us to the bill you're introducing in this session.
Right.
It must have a number, but
I don't know the number offhand, but I did one last year and couldn't get it heard. Senate Bill 9. I got it all the way over to the House side, and it died in the House side. And so this bill just defines. There's an old U.S. Supreme Court case, Miller v. California, years ago, that defined what's obscenities for adults. Really, is what it's about, not about children. So, but they use this term community standard throughout the legal opinion and actually in the resulting statutes around the country.
Okay.
So I'm defining community standard for children. And you might appreciate this. One of the factors is if a secular news media outlet won't show up because it's too vulgar or too sexually explicit, then it's too sexually explicit or vulgar for a child, a minor, to be given.
I think that's a fair gauge.
Yeah.
For no other reason than consistency.
Not a religious channel, a secular channel, and I'd be willing to make that too, because right now I haven't gotten one newspaper or one TV outlet to reproduce any of those books. Not one sentence, not anything that I've given them have they read or printed.
Right. Well, it's like you ever see these videos of parents at school board meetings.
Oh my gosh!
Who whip out and start reading these
I know.
books,
And they don't want to do that.
and they're like out of order. You can't.
Yeah.
It's like this is your library. But yeah.
Well,
I
they
think that's a
apologized for
fair
my
measure.
use of that word in committee last year. The chairman apologized to some senior pages that were but he voted no on the bill. But I mean, he apologized then for my use of that word when I had sent that email.
For use of what word?
The self-pleasuring word.
Oh, okay.
And so they apologized to these senior pages, and yet they vote against the bill. And I'm like, I don't understand. It's okay to give it to 7th and 8th grade boys without parental consent or knowledge, but I can't say the word in front of senior pages?
But it's really the intellectual cream of Oklahoma's high school.
I think they could deal with the word, actually.
Yeah. I mean, these are very smart, ambitious, driven, accomplished kids.
I think they could, but I have a big...
They're more adult than most of the people at the Capitol.
That's correct. That's correct. And so I think, honestly, I think the policy was a bit out of order. I mean, we're talking about a committee hearing where I'm trying to indicate to my colleagues why this is an important bill to do. And here's one of many examples of where people are proactively trying to put things in front of children that's inappropriate.
Yeah, or at least that apology was misdirected. Maybe the parents deserve the apology.
Maybe the parents. And I guess I don't mind them apologizing, but in the same effort, you should also restrict it for children. If you're restricting it for them and saying it should have never been told to you as an 18-year-old page or 7, then it shouldn't be given to 12-year-old kids.
I want to ask you how optimistic you are about how these bills do, especially in light of the fact that it's no secret that you challenged sitting President Pro Tem of the Senate, Greg Treat, for leadership this year. We'd love to hear about that and what, I guess, the fallout or consequences, if any, of that have been. Let's talk about that just as soon as we come back. We are in studio, Project 46 with Rob Standridge. Stay with us. Thank you for joining us. If you'd like to see the rest of this interview, download the Project 46 app or go to newsok46.com. Be sure to subscribe and you will get access to exclusive content here on Project 46, Oklahoma's fastest growing conservative media outlet.